What's up, guys? My name is Eduardo, and today's video is going to be short and sweet. I'm going to talk about different variations of P-bars and their uses, starting with the good old-fashioned gymnastics P-bars that you would see at the Olympics. P-bars stands for parallel bars because they are two bars parallel to each other, and they are stationary, they are adjustable to the athlete's height, and they are expensive, so they're pretty inaccessible to most people unless you actually work out at a gymnastics facility with gymnastics equipment and a gymnastics coach. But while they are inaccessible to most people, they are fun to talk about just to admire the athleticism it takes to hop on those things and work on specific skills that you can do on them. The reason they're adjustable is because athletes from various heights and various ages will use them and will work up from being able to do static movements to ballistic movements, like being able to swing from below the bars to above the bars. And it's incredibly fun, but scary at the same time. I use them regularly. I was a gymnast from the ages of 5 to 10, and we would use them in practice and as well as competition. Aside from training skills, they're very useful for developing strength and conditioning. We would use them as young athletes to improve our top support and our pulling strength, but it wasn't just for males. The females, although they didn't compete with P-bars, they would use them to improve their strength conditioning in various ways, like the top support holds and pulling work, including dead hangs and pull-ups and stuff like that, because the neutral grip makes it incredibly useful to train those things. And that's a perfect segue to dip bars. Dip bars are a great alternative to traditional P-bars because they are way more accessible, they're less expensive, and they are portable, which makes it fantastic if you need to train in different areas or you want to train at the park, for example. You can take them there. It's not that difficult to move from one place to the other. Now, I think the biggest highlight is that you can train pulling work on these, especially if you don't have a pull-up bar. You can do most things that you can do on a pull-up bar with the dip bars. Aside from being really good at training dips, as the name implies, they're also very good at most pulling things as well as static skills that you could do on the traditional P-bars. Now, the downside is that because the legs are so tall and you're most likely training at home with these, depending on your ceiling height, your feet might touch the ceiling if you're doing stuff like handstands. Aside from that, it's incredibly scary. The height of dip bars make them a bit more unstable. So if you're doing something in regards to balancing on top of them, it does make it a little bit scary, and the risk of injury becomes greater because you're much higher from the floor. So what I'd recommend for most people is getting a set of parallettes with legs ranging from 12 to 15 inches. And the reason is because you're able to still train all the static skills that you would on taller parallettes, but if you fall, the risk of injury is way less because the distance from you and the floor is way less. Versus if you fall on those taller ones, it's a big impact, and you don't want to experience that. Most people won't have the safety equipment like those really thick mats that you see in gymnastics places. Now, the downside is that you can't do the pulling work, but if you have a pull-up bar or something to hang from, they make a great complement to each other. And gymnasts aren't the only ones that use parallettes. Lots and lots of disciplines use them. For example, CrossFitters will use them to do handstand push-ups, and hand balancers will use them to work on things like press to handstand, where they go from an L-sit to a handstand. Break dancers will actually use these too to practice freezes and arm levers. The recreational fitness person will use them to work on basic exercises like push-ups and pike push-ups. They're incredibly useful for almost anyone if they're trying to improve their strength, skill, and control. So if you're unfamiliar with what those exercises are, here's a quick highlight to what you can actually accomplish and work up to with parallettes. once you've reached a certain level of comfort with these exercises, it doesn't have to be exactly that end product, but maybe something close to it. You can start combining movements together into a really cool flow, sort of like what you see at the Olympics with gymnasts, but at a much easier level and a little bit more controlled and static versus the ballistic nature of the Olympic style P-bars. So here's an example of what that could look like. Lastly, you have push-up bars, which are still P-bars. They are 2 bars parallel to each other, but they have much less range of motion. So what you can do on them is a bit limited. You can't necessarily swoop through them from an L-sit to a handstand, for example, if you have hamstring flexibility, which is the benefit of the taller ones. But what you can do, and the reason they're very, very useful, is that they are much closer to the ground compared to the 12 to 15 inch ones. So if you fall on those, the injury or the risk of injury is even more or less, right? It's not going to be as drastic of a fall. And you can use them as a step to those 12 to 15 inch ones. And another benefit of that is that they are running parallel to each other, and it changes the grip of exercises that you would do on the floor. Basically, anything that you can do on the floor, you can do on these smaller ones. And if you have wrist issues, for example, and doing push-ups on the floor hurts and feels uncomfortable, turning the wrist to a neutral position and in a closed fist typically tends to help a lot of people. It might not, but for a lot of people, it is a great alternative to doing these exercises on the floor. And it gives you just a bit more range of motion. So on the push-up, your range of motion stops where your hand touches your chest. But with the small parallettes, you get those extra couple inches to squeeze your shoulder blades on a push-up and get a bit more engagement. So that's pretty much it, guys. We have the order basically from tallest parallettes to smallest parallettes, and they all have their purpose. But what I would suggest for a beginner is getting the 12 to 15 inch range ones that have a capability of withstanding 300 pounds or more, and you'll have a nice set of bars to balance with, and they are a great complement to pulling apparatuses like gymnastics rings and pull-up bars, so you can have a complete home gym. So if you're wondering why I'm in a different setting and there's baby music in the background, we had a pretty crazy storm, and when I opened up my garage door, there was pretty much lots of hail and lots of rain, and it got half of my garage completely soaked. So I'm in here making the video, and that's it. Next time I'll be back in there. If you have any questions or concerns about the video, please let me know. If you like the content, please hit the like button and subscribe if you want to watch more videos like this one. Until next time.